for a long time. But I'm just excited, really, really excited to be here today to have an opportunity to talk about people that really speaks to my heart. As an African-American historian, it is fascinating to come in here and find the history of Summerville and to find how much of a role that we as African-Americans actually played in Summerville. And that's one of the reasons why Ken Battle originally talked me into coming to this museum. I didn't know it existed. So over the last few years, we've been trying to generate more and more information about the African-American history of Summerville. So the two subjects I'm going to talk about today are really, really fascinating. I'll spend a lot more time on Rollins Edwards than on Kitty Springs because his story is so dynamic. It is really absolutely dynamic and in many ways heartbreaking. But why are we here today? Special day for us. We're going to finally unveil our Summerville history. We've been working on this. Ken's been working on this. Dr. West's been working on this for well over a year. Exhibit celebrates success and generosity of great Summerville residents like Catherine Kitty Springs, who found great success in Summerville and used that success to open schools, as Dr. West kind of alluded to. It also features World War II veteran Rollins Edwards, who endured horrendous experiments on himself and fellow soldiers during his time in the Army. But still, he was a successful businessman for 40 years here in Summerville. And we extend the celebration of education to people like Dr. John Henry Austin. We talk about their Austin School. And Dr. West will talk even more about that when I bring him up again in a little bit. But it's just a taste of what we're trying to do with this room. And what we're really looking for, and I don't know if Ken is hovering around somewhere, but what we're really looking for are stories. People that have been here for a while and can tell us the stories. As Dr. West said, a lot of this is not written down. It's not written down. Our history quite often is not important enough to those in charge at the time to document that history. So we need each other. We have a fascinating oral tradition in history. In my African American Studies course, our entire first unit is on the continent of Africa. And them folks knew how to tell stories. And they knew how to preserve their history without being able to write anything down. So that's my way of saying, please, we need some stories. And if you know anyone, send them our way. So I'll start by sharing the story of a woman that we don't know enough about. But what we do know about her is quite impressive when you think about it. She appears to have come through this town, and the horrors of the town didn't really seem to touch her as it did many African Americans. Summerville's a small city. But even though it was in the heart of slavery, the heart of oppression, the heart of Jim Crow, somehow, some way, Summerville seemed to have been a place of possibilities. And not just possibilities for white Americans, but for all Americans. For black Americans, for white Americans. We tell stories here about the success of Jewish people, of us Gentiles here in this community, men as well as women. Summerville has a big history for such a small place. That is what we see when we celebrate the life of Kitty Springs. This is a woman that's near and dear to the hearts of us here at the Summerville Museum and Research Center. Her full name is Catherine Smith Springs, but we know her as Kitty Springs. Kitty Springs' house, which we talked about earlier, Ken was talking about it, was moved from 215 North Cedar Street, back parking lot, to 210 First East North Street. We were out there checking out the house just yesterday. When I think about Kitty Springs, I use her as an example of how great America can be if we didn't focus on race. That's easy because no one's quite sure what her race was, depending on who you talk to. An article was shared with me that says that she was the great-granddaughter of a woman born off the coast of Africa, while her family speaks of her as being mixed Cherokee Indian blood. Kitty Springs is listed as a free person of color by contemporary terminology. It is believed she is 1/4 Native American, part African American, and part European American. And she was probably born in Charleston, South Carolina. But Kitty Springs married a white man named Richard Springs. We assume she was married because she used the name Springs. At the time, this would not have been a legal marriage. Problems for them. But their marriage was confirmed in both their wills. With their marriage being illegal in an 1860 or 1870 census, they were listed as cohabitated. They were shacking up, basically, in the eyes of the law. And the city director of Charleston, Kitty Springs was recognized as the owner of a dressmaking shop and a residence on 340 King Street, with an associate, Richard Springs, who we know of as her husband, listed as a dry goods merchant whose store was at 45 Haynes Street. The couple was in Summerville before the Civil War, and Richard owned a store right here in Hutchinson Square. In 1868, Kitty opened Catherine Springs Hat and Millinery Shop. I had to look up millinery. I did, but it's just, she made hats. Thought it'd be something more complicated than that. But she was a great hat maker. Her place was on the corner of Blackjack and West 2nd North Street here in Summerville. Kitty Springs was a woman of means. In an 1870 census, she resided with her husband, Richard Springs, age 52 at the time, a retired merchant in Summerville. In this case, her race is noted as white, and she is listed as a housekeeper. To further confirm that Richard and Kitty were husband and wife, Richard Springs willed all of his property to Kitty. Nevertheless, due to social norms, in his will it states that she was willed his property for her services for years as housekeeper. To add to the confusion about her ethnicity, she was then listed as mulatto in the 1880 census. They just can't make up their mind about this wonderful woman. And in 1893, advertisement, Kitty Springs was listed as the proprietor of a store in Summerville on Main Street, offering dry goods, trimmings, millinery, ladies', children's, and infant shoes, worsted, which is high-quality wool, I had to look that one up, and other woolen goods, and a general assortment of small wares. That's a busy woman. As previously stated, Kitty Springs was a Charleston dressmaker with a thriving King Street business. She also owned a property on Hutchinson Square, which became the old post office and the seed feed store on this property in the 1880s, the old Felon Building, where she opened up a hat and dress shop. She was remembered making deliveries in her carriage with boxes of hats and shoes. Catherine Kitty Springs died June 1st, 1895. In her will, Kitty requested to be buried with her husband if possible. She was buried with Richard Springs at the old White Church Cemetery. Today, a monument to her stands in the Epiphany Churchyard, and today we're unveiling a glass engraving dedicated to her contributions to make the Church of Epiphany possible in Summerville. So thank you, Les, for that wonderful, wonderful tribute.
You're very welcome.
We cherish Catherine Kitty Springs and celebrate her generosity. She donated money and land that was used to build several landmark institutions. To summarize some of the extraordinary generosity of Catherine Kitty Smith Springs, Kitty donated money and or land for the following: the Church of the Epiphany, 212 Central Avenue, Summerville, South Carolina, founded around 1884 and built in 1887. The Bank School, operated by Epiphany Episcopal Church, same as the Church of the Epiphany. It was a mission of St. Paul's Episcopal Church, 316 West Carolina Avenue. The Bank School was the primary school for blacks until Alston Graded School was built. The Alston Graded School, I know we have a former student in here. I would love to talk to you after. Was built on land deeded by Kitty Springs after her death. The stipulation for using the land was to place none but a genteel dwelling or cottage or schoolhouse. Another stipulation showed her as an early environmentalist when she said no trees were to be cut or destroyed unnecessarily to build it. Also, the St. Barnabas Mission, established in 1883 under St. Paul's Episcopal Church, provided education, health care, religious instruction to poor white and biracial Indian descendant children of local tribes. The mission was a day school that also served as a public health center and a mission church. It was built at the intersection of North Main Street and Highway 78 in Summerville. By 1896, the mission was serving 42 families made up of 185 people. And the last one I'll talk about is this, what was known then as St. Barnabas Mission's Red School. It was there to educate poor white and American Indian children from 1883 until the 1930s and 40s, when its students were forced to integrate into the regular public school system. The land donated by Kitty Springs is the location of the Dorchester County Human Services Building today, which was the location of the old Dorchester County Hospital, built in 1937. Before I spend a considerably longer amount of time discussing our next honoree, Mr. Rollins Edwards, who directly benefited from the generosity of Kitty Springs as a student of both the Bank School and Austin Grady School. Our lead historian, once again, Dr. Ed West, will share a very important part of our new exhibit space, which celebrates these and other ways poor whites, American Indians, and African Americans received the education often denied those who were not fortunate enough to live in or around Summerville, South Carolina. Dr. West?
While we're looking at this image, this is the Tea Picker School, which was built by Charles Shepard for the children that were picking tea, and they were receiving the education at the time that they were doing this. This is the St. Barnabas Mission. This chapel is the chapel that's on the Common Seminary property right now. This is not the school, this is the chapel. I'm pretty sure that's not the school. I think this may be what's called the Salter School. The Salter School was up at Cook's Crossroads area. At that time, I know this picture was taken in 1930s, and it looks like it's not being used anymore. At least I hope it wasn't. It's a miserable looking little place. It's hard to think about going to school in a place like that. But and I can't find any evidence that Salter School remains or around anywhere. But it was for children that were beyond Bacon's Bridge in this area. This is Austin Grady School. And I was going to speak a few minutes about Austin Grady School. Are any of you all graduates of Austin? Anybody?
Not graduate. Went there till 4th grade.
But you were there. Austin School went up in 1910. This is when education in Summerville in general seemed to be clicking along at that point. The free school, which was located on Laurel Street at what today is the Saul Alexander Playground beside the Catholic Church parking lot. Everybody know where that is? Okay. The playground area is where the free school was. That was the image that we showed earlier, a little white building probably. Was replaced by Summerville Elementary School. It was also called the White School. The Summerville Elementary School was called the White School, and it was a publicly funded school. This is the first, as far as I know, the first publicly funded school in Summerville. I think the Bank School was publicly funded. I'm sorry, this is the Salter School was probably publicly funded. At the time that the Salter School went up and Summerville Elementary went up, it's likely when the Bank School went up. The Bank School was on the same property as the Epiphany Church owned by Kitty Springs. If you know Summerville, the corner of 2nd, West 2nd South Street and South Pine Street is where the modern St. Luke's Lutheran Chapel is, on Pine Street at 2nd South. That's the modern St. Luke's Lutheran Chapel. I think it was the site of the Bank School. That's what Rollins told me. So, so the bank school was a little school that looked about like this. We have a picture of it somewhere. It was across, basically roughly across the street from the Timrod Library. And the property across the street from the Timrod Library.
Was it for the Church of Epiphany, is that now beside the?
It's opposite corner from Church of Epiphany. You have to go across the block to get to the bank school. It's in the corner there, at Pine Street, 2nd South Street, where the chapel is of the Lutheran Church.
So it'd be behind the Church of Epiphany.
It's behind the Church of Epiphany, yeah, basically west of it. Okay, so the Alston School was built in this context, the best I can tell, is that Henry Alston obtained the property of Kitty Springs of Cedar Street at First North Street. West, right, West First North Street, yeah. There's a bank there now. There's also a historic sign there now. Okay. So, the way best I can tell is Henry Alston was a Charlestonian who was educated at Shaw University. Shaw University is the oldest historic black university in the South. Howard University came a year later, actually, after Shaw University. Shaw's in Raleigh. And Shaw University by 1880 had a medical school associated with it. It was called the Leonard Medical School, and John Henry Alston of Charleston was a medical student at Shaw University at Leonard Medical School in 1890. Graduated there within the next few years, and came to Summerville to set up his medical practice. The best I can tell, his practice was associated with what was going on in medical care locally. There was an infirmary associated with the St. Barnabas Mission. I can't tell him, I don't know how the infirmary worked. I imagine, and I don't really know how the infirmary worked. I don't know what black medical history there is of 1900 around here. I'd love to know it. But John Henry Alston, I know, was a doctor here, and he was a well-trained doctor. He apparently made some money, and he purchased the land probably from Kitty Springs Estate that became the property of Alston School, and used that property to build the school on. I know that he helped with the funding of the school and the establishment of the school. I know that Charles Shepard of the Tea Picker School also funded the school. There was a lot of local, as I was saying to you, people that had money here were spending their money on this. This is what they were buying. It was education for people. And it was just a wonderful idea about this all going on at that time. The Alston School, when it's opened, did not go to the high school level. And there wasn't an actual 12th grade at Alston School until I think it was 1949 or somewhere along there. The reason was, in the Jim Crow times, they didn't want black people to be, quotes, educated beyond elementary school. They didn't want them to have high school diplomas. High school diplomas would be something special. That changed apparently in the 1940s, and black people now could get high school diplomas and graduate from high schools. And this is what happened at Alston. Now, there's also a part to the Alston history which may not be known, and I would love to know more about it, but I can't find anything about it. And that's there were other large philanthropies that were helping schools in the South during the 1920s, 1930s. One of them was Sears and Roebuck, which was a huge operation out of Chicago. The guy who ran the Sears and Roebuck operation was named Rosenwall, and this is where the Rosenwall schools came from. The Lincolnville Town Hall is literally a Rosenwall school. There's a Rosenwall school that's been restored up at St. George. It's well worth a visit. Rosenwall was associated with Alston Graded School, Now, I can't tell how it was associated with it exactly. It looks to me like it may have been in a partnership with the graded school, I'm not sure. And it may be that if you let us come in here, we'll build this for you, and this is what we'll be doing here. And so they made some kind of a deal. I really don't know what happened. This is about late 20s, early 30s is when this happened. And so there was a technical school at Alston at that time, and people were learning technical skills along with the 3 R's and all that. So that was the history of Alston. Alston went on to become, it was taken down to be replaced by the modern Alston School in the 70s over in West Brownsville.
54.
And then the modern schools out, is that not right?
54.
1954.
Oh, I'm sorry, 50, you're right, 54, you're right, I'm sorry. Like you're saying, shouldn't go too far without my notes. But were you there
Yes.
in that time? So, so, there's a whole lot more about this, and you know what, this is really why I'm really so glad to see you all here, is that there are people in the room that know things. And we need to know more about it. We need to figure out more about it so we can be sure about what we're talking about and tell the story accurately. That's what we really want to do. So Robert's now going to talk about one of the students at the Bank School, which was the first, as far as I can tell, the first elementary school for black children that was publicly funded was the Bank School. That it's not a Banks, plural, bank, and it was called Bank because it was a bank. The building that the school was in was literally a bank, and it was converted into a schoolhouse. The fate of the Bank School was that it became a library called the George Washington Carver Library at about the same time that Timrod had developed in 1915 to 1920, in that range. Somewhere just after that, probably by 1930 or 1935, the Bank School probably closed and became the George Washington Carver Library. So that's what I know about that. You're on.
But wait a minute, so the George Washington Carver, is that associated with the property at Timrod now?
No. I've heard that school, the Bank School, was moved to the property behind the Timrod, and then it disappeared. I don't know what happened to it, because I don't see anything over there right now. It looks like that's.
Yeah, I was walking around behind the Timrod yesterday trying to find some evidence of something.
Yeah.
But, I don't want to get too close to these people's houses. So, make anybody nervous.
It's a guy with a shotgun over there.
Yeah. But before I move on, I really want to capitalize on what we have in our audience here today. Is there anyone with any stories, whether it's urban legend or whatever about Kitty Springs, that time period, her history, her genealogy, anything that you've heard differently from what I've already talked about?
Well, I have to open the floor because I'm her biggest fan.
Okay.
And that happened when we bought her house, like maybe 30 years ago. And so I went on a personal search to find out who this person was.
Are you Sue?
Yes.
Oh.
I'm Sue George.
Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you so much.
Spoke around your property yesterday.
Yeah, it's a mess. That storm really did a number on it, but I fell in love with her through a lady in Summerville named Willette Fay. She was, I guess, the oldest person in Summerville that had knowledgeable history of blacks and whites, and she told me the story of Catherine. And we can't leave out Richard Springs because Richard was white, and I was told that he came from the Fort Mill area from Spring Mills. So that money trail was from Fort Mill area, and back in the day, I had it documented through the Historical Society in Fort Mill, but my memory escapes me because I've researched it for so many years to actually find their grave sites. And when I did, I went to the town Historical Society, the mayors, everybody that had any kind of connection with Summerville said Catherine Springs documented. But I was told through, I tried to go through politics to document that this Richard Springs was from this family, and which they came back and said, no, it's a different Richard Springs, but Willette Fay said that it was. But we found their cemeteries at White Church Cemetery. My husband went on a search through all the black cemeteries trying to find it. And I've just been her biggest fan for the last umpteen years. So I'm not gonna tell my age, but I'm so happy that you have taken on the mantle, so to speak, and that you've done the research that you've done. Because, I mean, he was white, she was black, they were in love. It was a wonderful love story. And I tried so hard to get it in manuscript, and I sent it to Oprah Winfrey to send the story of this black-white love relationship between Richard and Catherine. And my document was never returned to me. I told them the story, and then about 2 years later, Oprah Winfrey came out with the movie Beloved. So, what I had written about Catherine and Richard, I felt like was the basis for that movie, but she got it reversed, the white thing. But I mean, I celebrate black and white history. I celebrate Summerville history, and I think we're more unified as a people when we know that we're a blended family, and that both white and black history is equally important. So it's a joy for me to be here today. I mean, it's like 35 years in the making, you know, to see this. It just touches my heart, because I think they had a beautiful love story.
You know, it's important that the last thing you just said about the white and black connection, because the very first day in my African American Studies class, I shocked a good portion of the class, especially if they're not black. I shocked them. I said, "Well, who in here is an African American?" And black kids raised. Well, African American Studies. African American Studies. High school. And of course, the black kids raised their hand. So I said, "White kids, why don't you raise your hand?" Like, what do you mean, Mr. Scarlett? Aren't you African American? No, I'm not African American. What do you mean? I'm Italian, or I'm Japanese, or whatever, right? I said, okay, what does it mean to be an African American? That your family descended from Africa? Guess what? Every family descended from Africa. The first human beings on the planet were from the Great Rift Valley in Africa and spread around the world. Our bodies changed environmentally, not DNA-wise. So really, everyone is connected to Africa. And I tell them, so now my students, they call each other cousin. Because they are, we're all cousins. We're all connected to Africa. Any comments or thoughts from any of the Austin attendants? I'd be curious if that history is talked about when you're a student there. Do you learn about it? Do they celebrate the origins of Austin Greatest?
Our classes still get together. Some of the classes still get together.
What about as an institution? Do they promote that history within the school? Do they celebrate that history? Sir?
They were given, we compiled a book, gave it to Alston. They used that in the last 2 weeks of school several years ago. And Dr. West, the infirmary that Dr. Alston was called the Lee Infirmary.
There was a Lee, though. There was a Dr. Lee, right?
There is a pamphlet in the Tim Broad Library that has Dr. Alston's name on it.
Yes, that's true.
And you'll see Dr. Alston was an affiliate.
And that's out there near the St. Barnabas Mission.
Yeah, at the St. Barnabas Mission. There has been an effort, which we ended up here with Ken Battle, then upstairs. That's another story. To get that kind of history compiled, because as you said, it has been an oral tradition, being that there has never been anything written. And as we have grown older, I'm a graduate of Austin High School, okay? Most of us are now passing on to the great beyond. So what's left is to basically take tape recorders for those that are still here and use that. And then somebody in the future can compile all that, but most of the digitized stuff like you see, because my brother, as a matter of fact, Dr. West, as you remember when we did the tour of Summerville for my family, he remembered all of a sudden, we went down this street there, the St. Luke's, where St. Luke's, I guess, main facility is, right across the street was where he remembered going to the George Washington Carver library. And we heard the rumor too, that it was moved behind Timrod. But nobody in the earthly tradition has ever said that that happened. The building was a shanty to start with, so moving it toward Timrod would have made it almost practically
I
impossible.
spoke to along with that Timron 2 weeks ago,
Mhm.
PJ. She's now the select person there, the head of the library, I guess. And she said she's seen that building, that it was moved to a house behind a woman.
Across the street
further
behind the
east.
cottage, yeah.
No, it's behind a house, a
Yeah.
woman's house,
Mhm.
not on Timron property, but quite a distance away.
But you think it's in that block?
No, she didn't think so, but if we just talk to PJ again, she can tell us whose house it is, but she went to see it.
This kind of stuff makes me crazy.
That family was using it, as a Photoshop. Her husband was taking photographs, but we'll get the details.
Yeah, well, Dr. West, is almost like that slave cottage we went to, was on somebody else's property, that you allowed us to
Middle of nowhere.
go see it. It's kind of dangerous to go sneaking around
It
people's
is.
property.
You never know.
But she used
But we have a copy of that pamphlet that's in the Timbroid Library too. And we're going, some of us have gone to the state archives to try to find, there used to be a newspaper published nationally here in the United States called the Pittsburgh Courier. The color of the paper was like a burnt orange. And we know, we also have the original, one of the original copies of the invitation from the band at the Jenkins Orphanage that played at the opening ceremony of Austin. So it's piece by piece, and several people in their trunks. Okay, if you don't know what a trunk is, people used to keep trunks. They have copies of old stuff that's deteriorated, and basically we just photocopy of them because they're very fragile. And we're trying to put that together in order to leave some type of digital legacy now, because archiving stuff like, maybe you have the money to keep paper from deteriorating, but paper deteriorates very, very quickly. So we've been trying to digitize most of the stuff as we get it. But I'm quite sure somebody in Summerville, in their old archives or something, may have copies of stuff that we can collectively use, pictures, for instance, because some of the people like Miss Katie, in my church, Miss Katie Gibbs, she actually was one of the people who went to the Shepherd's, the T-Farm school. They were educated there. But once again, she has gone on to the great beyond too. And then her last relative that I knew of just died a few weeks ago. But there is a legacy, especially around Sass Potus, which was one of the entrepreneurs here in Summerville. And you can look in Beth's Porch, whatever. There's a whole lot of little books that's out there that we can, and Garen Drugstore also has some stuff. What you can find.
It's a
in
good
Garen.
time to remind you that this is the Summerville Museum and Research Center. So if anyone has documentation they would like to share or
Bring it.
donate to us, we'll take really good care of it. We have an actual research center upstairs with a lot of files, and like you said, handling that paper can be arduous. Try to keep everything not deteriorating or, yeah.
Did you introduce yourself, sir?
I'm nobody trying to be somebody to tell everybody that Austin was still alive. My name is Louis Fowler. My father came here from Alabama. My mother is from native Charleston. Juanita knows that Rollin is kin to everybody in Summerville. Now, how he got kin to my mama, don't ask me. When we were coming up, we didn't ask them kind of questions, and I don't want to know. And that's as far as it goes. But through Dr. West was kind enough doing my family reunion here, who came from Alabama, to see where my folks settled at, because they came here during the CCC camp days, which was another avenue to come from.
Civilian Conservation Corps.
Yeah.
During the
Down Highway 78, all the way from Alabama, right here to Summerville, South Carolina, not too far off of Highway 78, they end up establishing houses. So there is a lot of stories, like all of the people have said. The difficulty they got here at the museum or the research, Summerville Museum and Research Center is trying to collect those stories into some type of history. And I said history,
Yeah.
because that's exactly what we're trying to do.
Sure.
And Dr. West could tell you, during the period of the 1920s and 1930s, they called the golden years of Summerville, South Carolina. If you think there was times of Jim Crow going on, one of the things you find during that period wasn't happening in Summerville. You know where the Dorchester County this building is? It used to be the old hospital. Well, we used to have a colored section. As a matter of fact, my second child was born in that hospital. Anyway, to make a
Two
long
sides.
story. Yeah.
Two sides.
I was born there too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right over here. Oh, yeah.
Well, as a deacon in my church, the only thing I can tell you is amen. But
Well, the
that's
reason
the story.
the reason I wanted to identify him is because he is on the committee that's helping us to collect all of this information. And Mr. Denver, also right next to him, is also on that committee, you know, Juanita's right there in the middle of it, you know? So, all we're doing as a collective is to get the information we can to reveal what's going on here in the town of Summerville and how unique Summerville is. You know, we have the chief of the Waspassaw tribe right here, you know, the secretary. You know, they're instrumental in all of the things that we're trying to find out and research and reveal right here what's going on in Summerville. That's why we're here today. You know, that room that we have upstairs is a very small room. It's a very impactful room. We want it to grow even more, and with your help, we'll be able to do that. I want to thank Lex because he was a catalyst in this by just doing one piece of art that brought all of us together, you know. And then you have Sujo, you know, who helps also. There's things that we're going to reveal later on about what we found where Kitty Springs' house is. You know, and everybody kept asking, "Where's the house?" We know where the house is now. I'm not going to tell you.
Well,
We'll
that's
tell
where
you. We'll bring you over.
It's where it
That's where it was, and now we can show you where it is. Okay?
And Chief, I never miss an opportunity to come up with more historical ideas or information. So if you would ever want us to represent the tribe in a lecture series here, or if you'd like to come in and share your stories, we'd be honored to share that history here at the museum.
Well, thank you. We are very connected to the area. We're known as the Somerville Indians. You know, before, you know, it became the Pineland Village, we were living in the pines. And of course, you know, like I said in the pamphlet, you know, we were having children having church in our homes, and before we had the St. Barnabas Mission School, and I was just very fascinated when you were talking about the Red School, because I had an aunt that went to the Red School.
Oh, wow.
And, and she told me it was located kind of where Bank of America is.
Yes.
Yes.
Over there.
Right.
So, you
And
know.
that was Catherine Springs' property.
And that's why, and this is where I think some of the problems and the disconnect comes from, is because the people who write the history, the people who is recording all this history,
Brownsville Church.
tries to not give credit. So we're sitting there, what race is Kitty Springs?
Right.
And we're having, you know, Native people, we're proud of her Cherokee connections, and everyone wants to be proud of her African American connection. But the thing that is so unique to me as a woman is this is a lady
Yes.
in this time,
Yes.
and the great thing she did
Yes.
in a world where they had no rights. And how much she had a heart for people of color, and how the legacy she left.
Her deeds don't lie.
Yeah.
You know,
If you want accurate history, let the deeds do the talking.
And so-
Because before there was a Dr. Austin, there was a Catherine Springs. And by deed, she said, none but a schoolhouse shall ever be built here, or my descendants has the right to have it removed. So that's by deed, and deeds don't lie.
well, you know, as I said, you know, she had a heart for the people, and she had a legacy she left. And it was because of that, you know, we were able to, even with the St. Barnabas School, you know, we, like you said, oral history is oral tradition, but it's those missionaries that were keeping the list of names of people who were coming in, getting baptized and missionized, and we're like going back now and saying, okay, that is my ancestor, and we have proof, because that's the only material culture there is now, because everything has been kind of thrown away or hidden somewhere, you know. That's why we were very vocal about making sure that that church, that chapel is maintained and not,
Yes.
thank God who moved it. They were going to tear it down. You know, they were going to tear it down, but the church says we'll take it and move it, and that's the only legacy we have left. So Kitty Springs is very important. She's what brought us
Yes.
here. But, you know, just the history itself, it is not unique to just one marginalized community.
Right.
It's the same story, it's just a different perspective of it.
So I sincerely offer again my services,
Absolutely.
services of this museum, anytime we want to put something together to tell those stories.
Yes, sir.
We're just curious, as an Austin graduate, how the property, as she said, if Kitty Springs deeded that property, and we remember Mr. Failer Grocery Store, which used to be across the street on that location, there was a deed that they had during the time we put up the historical marker for Austin Grade School, that it was, how that property all of a sudden got lost, that whole block. And then during 1953 and 54, when they built the school on Bryan Street, what happened? How did that property get conveyed if it was ever locked up like that? That's
Yep, that was my thoughts. And if you remember, I went to when y'all met 30 years ago, whenever it was, me and my husband met y'all on the corner before that historical marker.
you in the yellow house. Was in the, you were?
Yes.
Oh, you were in the. Oh, you. That was you. Okay.
No, I'm the owner of
Yeah.
Catherine's house, but I took my deeds to that meeting that y'all had on the corner.
Yes.
Before that historical
Yeah.
monument was ever erected, and I showed you those deeds showing that Catherine Springs donated this property for, it said nothing but a schoolhouse shall ever be erected here. And
Sorry about
nothing
that.
was done about it.
I'm sorry. I can hear the voice now, but the eyes are dim with age.
Right, same here. I'm 76 now, so right.
I'm 76 too. Thank you.
1947 was a good year.
Good year. It's good cheese though.
Thank
God
you
bless
very much for your contributions, and we would love to talk to anyone who wants to stick around afterwards and extend this conversation, because I'm fascinated just with the history. Kim, you're about to say something?
I just wanted to invite you all to, you know, start going up.
We're not done yet.
Not done yet.
We haven't even started talking about Rollins yet.
The commercial comes later.
Yeah. It's just been such a good family meeting.
As they had an opportunity, because I know some people had to leave, I've been taking them up through the room and just showing them a few things.
Be sure you
and
check
then
the
they'll be
museum
heading
before you
out,
leave.
You know.
Yeah.
We definitely want you to see what we're trying to do. And to let you know that Blanche and Louis Fowler have been instrumental in getting the funds together to start putting these exhibits in that room. You know, they're raising funds, and Ben's been right there with them, and that's why we've been able to get this moving. You know, and the Fowlers have made the decision to continue to sponsor that room through Percy and Daisy. To be able to sponsor exhibits in that room, to continue to help us to raise funds, to put other exhibits in there. And I'm telling you, information comes in every day. We just hung a picture up there of Mr. William Billy Wilson, who was a musician. And he played at the Carolina Inn and I think the Squirrel Inn, and he played for 2 presidents. You know, he's a ancestor, a music singer of Tillman Millhouse. You know, so Tillman is helping us to collect that information on this young man. There's so much history here, You know, and I feel bad about our docents, you know, because we keep throwing stuff at them.
We're taking notes.
I remember back in the '60s that the Austin School had the coolest band that marched through Summerville. Everybody went there to the parade just to hear them play. It was crazy.
So, I just wanted to offer that. I'm sorry I interrupted you, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn it back over to Rob. Okay, well, if y'all want to.
Hang with me about 15 more minutes. We'll be totally done. But I just want to say once again, thank you for Ms. Juanita Rollins being here.
Yeah.
It's quite an honor to have you here today.
And I hate to have to.
Well, I say, I got a feeling you know this story.
But I wanna go upstairs
Yeah.
before I have to leave.
Yes, ma'am.
Please excuse me, I have to run.
Sorry, it's easier for me to talk about this stuff than I do.
Okay. I got, his niece is here, she'll correct me.
Okay. So next, we do have the privilege of discussing the life of one of Summerville's most honorable and sometimes flamboyant residents. Is that a good word for him?
That's it, thanks to one.
Certainly. So Rollins was born on the Bay. In 1922, this refers to Pigeon Bay Road in Summerville, South Carolina. I'm sure many children in the neighborhood were envious, because young Rollins was the only one in the neighborhood, only black kid in the neighborhood with his own bicycle. And we'll see that bicycle upstairs in the exhibit. Later, Mr. and Mrs. Edwards lived in Summerville's historically black community called Brownsville. Sleepy Street dotted with older red brick houses, mobile homes, wooded lots overgrown with vegetation. As I alluded to earlier, Rollins Edwards directly benefited from Kitty Springs as a student of the Bank School and also as a student of Austin Graded School. During his incredible and challenging life, Mr. Rollins Edwards was a soldier, a jazz musician, a businessman, a politician, Grand Master of the South Carolina Prince Hall Masons, and most importantly, a loving son and dedicated and appreciative husband to two extraordinary wives, Lucille and Juanita, one at a time, of course. Racial tension was a recurring theme throughout the life, but not every place he lived was as tolerant as Summerville, especially during his time in the segregated U.S. Army. Rollins did not volunteer for the Army. He was drafted into World War II. What happened to him during his time in the Army was so terrible, so unbelievable, that Army officials threatened him with prison if he ever discussed what happened at Camp Claiborne, Louisiana. Most of the information that I will share with you today comes from the book Burned, Conversations with a Black World War II Veteran, available here in the Summerville Museum and Research Center. It was written from a series of interviews done by a college student, who's now a college professor today, named Michael T. Owens. This story takes us back to the 1940s, a time of racism, segregation, and war, a perilous time for a young black man. Rollins Edwards was an intelligent young man. He scored a 142 on the Army IQ test. As a result, the Army sent him to Fort Bragg to help the guys that couldn't read and write. He stayed at Fort Bragg about 3 or 4 months. Then he was sent to Camp Claiborne, Louisiana, where his life would be changed forever. Because of his clear potential, he received infantry training and engineering training. After basic training, he was sent to correspondence school and to surveyor school. Clearly, he had a lot to offer the Army and the United States. But they chose instead to squander that potential simply because of the color of his skin. Although drafted, Mr. Edwards said he really wanted to go into the Army until he actually got there. After surveyor school, he enjoyed some downtime. However, it ended abruptly when he was told to turn his rifle and report for a special assignment. That assignment would change his life forever. He reportedly told the author, "Had I known what was coming, I would have gotten off the truck and said, 'You can go to hell. You can put me in jail or do whatever you want to do.'" Once he arrived at the project site, one of the lieutenants came out and told them to roll up their sleeves. And that is when he received the first of many shots to come. That first shot was an injection of poisonous mustard gas, intentionally injected into a human being. Why? What could justify subjecting a human being to such an assault, especially one of your own fellow soldiers? According to the U.S. Army, this was done according to a perceived threat from Germany, who was developing a chemical warfare program. So the United States decided they needed to develop a program of their own. Testing initially consisted of animals, but in 1942, President Roosevelt authorized the War Department to begin testing on human volunteers. But many of those so-called volunteers, like Rollins Edwards, were forced to participate. America condemned Germany's gruesome experiments on humans while secretly experimenting on its own servicemen. Soldiers were exposed to various toxic gases to determine the level of pain they could withstand. Medical scientists initially believed black soldiers had a thick, thorny layer of skin that helped withstand the effects of mustard gas. After that first dose of mustard gas on day one, Mr. Edwards said, the thing was burning. It felt like about 10 fire ants had hit me in one place at one time. Later that same day, he and others were subjected to the gas chamber. The instructor told them not to put the gas mask on until you smell gas. Mr. Edwards put his on the minute he heard the sound of gas being released. Those who did not started to scream because it felt like there were 1 million red ants all over their body. In addition, their faces got blistered and burned by the gas. Mr. Edwards said, had it been any stronger, it probably would have killed us all. Man, it was terrible. I started vomiting. You'd vomit until you'd vomit blood. Photos provided by Mr. Edwards showed what the gas does to human skin. He had scaly sores cascading down his back and shoulders. This is the time that I'm glad Juanita's not in there. In several other pictures, his skin had rotted on his legs, exposing spots of bloodied flesh. Another photograph shows his skin peeling from his palms. As I mentioned, he received the first shot and was placed in a gas chamber all on day one. The next day, believe it or not, was worse, because that was the Lewisite gas test. Sadly, Rollins Edwards and others were exposed to some type of gas every day for 30 days. They wanted to see what effect it had on black skin. Every day, it was a different type of gas. According to Mr. Edwards, the mustard gas would just set you on fire. But that Lewisite, that was the bad one. They just sprayed it on you. Then we crawled around on the ground in it. Lewisite really messes with your stomach. It messes up your enzymes. You couldn't eat after that. You'd eat, and then you just throw it right back up. To no one's surprise, nobody would take responsibility for them going through that mustard gas. They never did any medical follow-up on the black soldiers who went through the mustard gas testing. When it was over, the Army told them it was a secret experiment and they were lucky to be a part of it. And if they opened their mouths, they would be sent to penitentiary for the rest of their lives. When they finally left, Rollins Edwards was given a manila envelope to give to his new commanding officer. Whatever was in that envelope was enough for his new commander to tell him, you don't have to do any work. But they still wouldn't send him home. He eventually was sent to serve in Europe, where he continued to have problems with white American soldiers, but said Europeans treated him okay. Sadly, they were forced to serve meals to German prisoners of war in a dining hall they themselves were not allowed to use. Although the war in Europe ended, war in the Pacific raged on. Mr. Edwards learned he was soon headed to the Pacific to battle the Japanese Imperial Army. He did manage to have a little fun. While in the Philippines, before heading off to help with the occupation in Japan, he played drums in a makeshift band to pass the time away. In our exhibit, this aspect of his life is represented by a single drum from his actual drum set, which we also have in storage upstairs. Sadly, by the time he reached Japan, he was covered with sores from head to toe. He had boils all over him, his thighs, and all over his body. That was the second time that happened to him. During the war, doctors were not sure how to medically treat Mr. Edwards' condition. And oftentimes, that lack of knowledge led to misdiagnosis. After the discovery of penicillin, a doctor recommended that to Mr. Edwards. But he said he would have to take 60 shots in just 7 days. After 15 shots, his skin would get so hard, you couldn't get the needle in there. So the doctor would have to use someplace else on his body. He had to wake up every 3 hours to get a shot. After the Japanese surrender, Mr. Edwards was finally headed home. When he got off the ship in Seattle, there wasn't anybody to welcome him because they were an all-black unit. It was just the Red Cross there giving out donuts and coffee. When he finally made it back to Summerville by bus, he got impatient waiting for the 6-hour train, so he just jumped on a bus. His father met him at Garen's drugstore. Having served in World War I, he knew by looking at his son's face that he'd been exposed to mustard gas. He was upset, but they were more worried about his mother's reaction. When he told his mother, she went berserk. She screamed and wanted to know what they did to her baby. To put his medical struggles into perspective, here is what Mr. Edwards' description of what would happen when he'd have an outbreak. It hits me overnight. God, I start itching, and the next thing I know, I'm covered in sores from head to toe. I turn gray all of a sudden, and then break out in all those sores. Big blisters and everything. It burns. If I comb my hair, a lot of it came out. Or if I wash my pubic hairs, they wash off. Mr. Edwards learned that his mother never spent a dime of the pension checks he was sending her. It was $2,500, and he had almost that amount in his pocket already. So I did some research. And $5,000 in 1946 is like having $86,000 today.
Wow.
What did he do with that money? First, he fixed up his parents' home. And then he bought his mother a new bedroom set. He then went back to work at the laundry he worked at before he joined the Army. He then visited a new doctor in town. And the doctor thought he was lying about what he said the Army did to him. Then sadly, the doctor told him that all those penicillin shots meant that he could never father children. Later, he moved to Boston to seek his fortune. He said he moved to Boston because he wanted to play with the big bands there. He eventually got in with a few small bands. Later, he joined a few of the big bands. His dream was fully realized when he filled in for the drummer in Count Basie's band. The main drummer struggled with alcohol. His poor choices led to Mr. Edwards becoming a full-time drummer for the Count Basie Orchestra. Although he was living his dream, his medical condition still affected his life. Over 12 years on the road with the band, he had a couple of outbreaks. Nobody wanted to sleep in the same room as him or even sit around him. Another strain of life on the road was the fact he left his wife by herself a lot. Eventually, his wife got tired of it, and he had to make a choice. Rollins wisely chose his wife over traveling with the band. He stayed in Boston and played a couple of years in nightclubs. After 15 years in Boston, he returned to Summerville and opened a dry cleaning shop in 1961 and ran it for 40 years. Sadly, his wife Lucille got cancer and passed away in 1981. He remained single for a couple of years before marrying Juanita. He is quoted as saying, "She's the best wife a man could ever have. She could have done better, but I couldn't have done any better." I had 2 lives, and I had the perfect mate for both of them. Now, if that ain't luck, I don't know what it is. While operating a successful dry cleaning business, you'll see the actual sign for his cleaners on display upstairs. Mr. Edwards became active in politics. In 1975, he became the first black member of the Dorchester County Council, where he served 5 years. Later, in 1988, he won a seat on the Summerville Town Council, becoming only the second African American in the town's history to do so. Despite threats, racism, discrimination, and bigotry, he served his community for 17 years. He said he went into politics because blacks had no say. The final aspect of the life of Rollins Edwards I want to discuss was his struggle to get the country he fought for to fight for him. Despite his mistreatment as a World War II soldier, he was equally mistreated as a veteran seeking his hard-earned Veterans Disability benefits. Once he applied, the Veterans Administration, the VA, pre-screened him over the phone and told him to go to the local office only to be denied. After a new doctor joined the VA, and Mr. Edwards showed him pictures of his outbreaks, the doctor got upset and sent the pictures to Washington, D.C. They sent the letter back saying they needed time to analyze if the pictures were fakes. Then he showed the pictures to Senator Hollins, Senator Thurman, and Governor Mark Sanford. They got upset, then the ball started rolling. Nevertheless, he went to Columbia 3 or 4 times, and they said they could find no proof the Army had done this to him. It took 50 years and the Freedom of Information Act before the Army finally admitted it. Yes, at this point, Mr. Edwards had been fighting the federal government for his benefits for 50 years. One day, he got a letter saying, come to Washington for a hearing. And it couldn't have come at a better time because he was having one of those attacks. While in his hotel, he lost 85% of his skin. The skin just popped off, and his wife swept it in a corner. The jar of skin that he started carrying around came from that night. I believe that was in, you see the jar right here. When I met him, he was carrying this jar, right here in this very room. He was carrying that jar, telling his story. The jar of skin that he started carrying around came from that night. His wife had to grease him down at night, and he would sleep in a rubber suit. While in Washington, they took him to the VA hospital. Every dermatologist in the hospital came down to see the guy whose skin was just popping off. Once back in South Carolina, they sent him to MUSC. Nobody would believe the story. They'd all just say, no, that couldn't happen. They wouldn't do that to human beings. Over the years, Mr. Edwards again suffered, as doctors, through trial and error, experimented with a variety of treatments. Finally, after 50 years of fighting, Mr. Edwards was approved for disability benefits, but only at 50%, with expectations of raises. Rollins continued to fight until his disability rating was raised to 100%. After that first letter telling him he was approved, his wife came by the cleaners and he told her, and I quote, I'm going in the house, I'm going to sit down, close that damn door. And he never worked another day in that business. As you walk through the exhibit, please remember the dedication and sacrifice of Mr. Rollins Edwards, the benevolence of Ms. Catherine Kitty Springs, and the forward thinking of Dr. Charles Shepard of the Pinehurst Tea Picker School, Dr. John Henry Alston of Alston Graded School, and several others who contributed to opening avenues of education and opportunity to people often left behind by society.